Welcome, everybody. It is so nice to have you back for another expert interview series. My name is Rebecca Cooper, and I'm the Communications and Research Director for the Representation Project. We are a nonprofit organization founded by Jennifer Siebel Newsom, and we use films and campaigns to challenge harmful gender norms and stereotypes. So this interview today is part of our larger series, the Boys Will Be Boys campaign. And when we say boys will be boys, we mean that they can be anything and everything they want to be without the constraints of restrictive masculinity, which is really the world we want to create and see. So this campaign and this interview today is a love letter to boys and men. And I am really grateful to be here. I'm delighted to be interviewing Dr. Yvonne Vissing. I'm going to read you her bio real quick, which is very impressive. Yvonne Vissing is a professor of healthcare studies at Salem State University. As founding director of the Salem State University Center for Childhood and Youth Studies in Massachusetts, she has created international partnerships with the University of Nottingham in England and Swansea University in Wales. And hopefully I pronounced that right. I'm thinking I did not. She has also been appointed U.S. Policy Chair by the International Hope for Children United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child Policy Center. In addition, Vissing serves on the American Association for the Advancement of Science Human Rights Council and on the steering committee for the Human Rights Educators USA, which is all incredibly impressive. So impressive. Welcome, Yvonne. It is so good to have you here today. I know you have so Yvonne has put together some slides for us. I'm going to throw them up real quick so that we can use them as I ask her some of the questions I have. And while you're listening, please think if you have any questions at all, please feel free to put them in our Q&A section, and I will answer those, I will ask those, and Dr. Vissing will answer them after we get through our first section. And so let's get started. So let's jump right in. The first question I have for you, Dr. Vissing, tell us about your path to healthy masculinity and gender equity work. When and how did you get on this path, and what is your story?
Oh, everybody's got a story, and they start when we're little, right? So I remember as a little girl, can we go back to the other one?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. When I was a little girl, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad worked, and she wanted to work, and he didn't want her to. She talked about being a cashier in a store. She talked about being a telephone operator. She loved working, and it got a sense of identity. But my dad was of the mindset that if she worked, it meant he wasn't a good provider. And so with that, she didn't work. And so I remember wanting to work, and back in that time period, I looked at the want ads, and they had help wanted men, help wanted women. And all the good jobs were the guy jobs, right? And all the women's jobs were boring and didn't pay well. And so I wondered about why this was the case. And when I had my own children, I have a girl, boy, girl. I started to realize the importance of socializing boys. And I realized I didn't know how to do it very well. I did it okay with my girls, but I didn't know how to do it with my son. And so I gave way to men who told me about, you don't know how to raise a boy because you're not a guy. And I think that's a lot of the images and messages that they imposed upon him were toxic, and they did not serve his best interest. Now I have one of my daughters has 3 little boys, and she's trying to do what I wish I had done, right? And in socializing them in ways to allow them to really be themselves. So I really think that this is an important thing for men and for women alike, to have this shift in looking at men to be whatever they want to be.
Yeah, well, we definitely agree. Okay, thank you for sharing that. So my next question for you is, as an expert in child development and youth studies, what would you say are the primary harms of traditional and restrictive masculinity for boys and men?
Oh, that would be good. If you could put the next slide up, that would be great.
Yeah.
I started thinking about all of these dangers that get imposed upon us. And down at the bottom, there's a bear. And a woman told me, who would you rather find yourself stuck in the woods with unexpectedly, a bear or a man? And they said you'd have a better chance fighting the bear. All right. And so the idea of this toxic masculinity of power and control, and I'm in charge and you'll do what I say, that is old school, but it's still apparent. I teach at the university and I watch my students, and you listen to them in line at the coffee shop, talking about things. And I don't know that the scripts are that different today than they were when I was dating. Um, so also up in the box, I've got this note of the uh, book by Gordon Fellman, and it was called Rambo and the Dalai Lama. And so that boys are really stuck into this notion of, do you want to be a gentleman, or do you want to be like the Dalai Lama, or do you want to be like Rambo? And we have this Rambo issue image forced upon them. So look at all of those different things that guys have to deal with. I mean, that's a lot to put on anybody, especially a little boy, and you're trying to figure out, who are you? And they're just coming at you like arrows, and you're the target. So are there any
Yeah.
you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, so this we've talked about the man box, I think, in previous interviews. And the research around the man box is incredibly helpful language for talking about this work. But maybe you could give us a little more about what the man box is and where it comes from. And we can talk more about the ways that media perpetuates the man box too.
That's fine. Yeah, I think that there's this view of what men or boys are supposed to be. And it's like, you don't cry. You have a limited range of emotion, and the one that you are allowed is anger. All right.
Mm.
And the fact that you're not supposed to cry. I got caught on this the other day. I was with my daughter and her boys, and one of the boys was having a meltdown. And we were just trying to get him in the car, so we could go home and get ice cream and things. And I remember my default, the moment trying to hurry them, I said, "Come on, you're a big guy. You don't need to cry. You can get in the car." And she called me on it and says, he can feel however he wants to feel. And I said, you're right. And it was such a default, of years of socialization, so this issue of being able to have your emotions and to not repress them or be so stoic, I think that is essential part of that man box. And then behaviorally, you need to be in control and you
Hmm.
need to be in charge. I don't know why I thought that if I had something that I need fixed, that I could go talk to a guy. Even today, I'll think, oh, I don't know how to do that. How about change that tire? Or I'm having trouble with the screwdriver. I'll just ask a guy. But why? It's not like it's in their DNA, that they could do this. So we have these old scripts that keep playing, and they are hundreds of years old.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild, and to see the ways that they morph and change over the years, but still stay with us.
We're
Um,
better. I think we're better today, but they are still present. And I think this is part of the issue of confusion for a guy, because you really are picking up two different set of narratives
mm,
about what you're supposed to be like.
yeah. Yeah. Wow. So the man box, it has all of these prescriptions for how men are supposed to be, and kind of talks about um, what we expect of men, like Dr. Vissing is saying, and also the not just the way that they're supposed to behave, but also the ways that they interact in relationships, and interact with their families, and the risky behaviors they get involved in. I normally would wait till the end for Q&A, but this question actually fits right into what we're talking about. This anonymous attendee asks, what are examples of the risky behavior included in the man box?
I think that because you can't really deal with your emotions, you end up substituting, and drugs and alcohol become big. Going to the gym and thinking that you have to have a 6-pack or 12-pack, I think that's part of it. I think that the use of guns, the use of weapons that I can force you, the hooking into games and nonstop, being online. I think that those are some of them. The blaming and shaming, that goes down.
Yeah.
Um, all of these are counterproductive. Like in school, I will have a test and I'll give the test out. And if a student doesn't do well, the girls come in and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I should have studied hard. I had a cold, my dog died." I mean, they have all kinds of, it's my fault kind of things. The guys will come in and say, "That's a dumb question." And it's my fault that they didn't do well. And it's
Wow.
so interesting to watch that narrative. So blaming other people is a dysfunction in humane relationships. Nobody wants to be around you if you're going to make them feel bad. So
Right.
I know a lot of people who try to date and they say they can't find a good guy to date, because they all want to be into this power and control, or they're using drugs, or, they're not sensitive. So I
Mm.
think that all of these play out.
Yeah, absolutely. We have definitely failed men and boys when it comes to relationships. So a question for you is, what I'm curious more about, if you could say more about what the media's role is in this. And I know you have a slide. I'm going to put this up right now while you answer this question, but what ways does the media perpetuate some of the harms of the man box?
Okay, I think that it's easy to blame the media for everything today, and it is unfortunate. I think that for boys in particular, but girls too, we're getting all of these messages, and they're again like arrows being flung at us, and we can't escape. So on this, we've got toys, and there are still girl toys and boy toys, and they're different colors, and they do different things. The advertisements of what people are supposed to eat or drink, even looking at commercials, this focus on fitness, on what you wear. I was with a little boy, and little blonde-haired kid, got wet, had sister's sweater in the car, went to put the pink sweater on the little boy who was 3, and the boy had a meltdown, said he couldn't wear that sweater, that they think he was a sissy and he'd get picked on. All right,
Mm,
so even what you wear, that you've got the movies, you've got the video games, all of these are coming at uh, us so hard and heavy, but I don't think that the media is totally responsible. I do think they have their share of it, absolutely. But we can contextualize, things for them and put them in the place. But this will require human interaction. And so when we talk about in a little bit, how do you address this? I think part of it is by talking. Um, like I was at dinner last night, and there's a family, and the kids are starting to misbehave. And what do? They stick a phone in their hands for them to
mm.
play. Why aren't we talking about what's going on? There are a million things that they could be talking about, but that would require interaction. All right. And so I think that if you do have a violent film, or even watching the news, which is plenty violent, if you are sitting talking to them about what it is, contextualizing it, I think is key.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Media literacy is so important too, in being able to decode the stereotypes and the tropes that we are exposed to every day. We've talked before about the Representation Project has done posts before and some research on what it means to watch and consume media, with keeping in mind the media you're consuming, and have open up conversations with daughters and nieces and young girls about what princess culture means. And I just think it's so important, to be able to give them, a proverbial armor for all of the media that they're exposed to, as they grow up. Yeah. So we know we've touched on in previous interviews too the epidemic of male loneliness, and we know that this is, obviously the media is not to blame for this, but definitely perpetuates a lot of the issues that lead to men and boys isolating. Can you tell us why boys are experiencing this loneliness, and what we can do about that?
Sure. I think we have another slide that could have some of that. Um, it doesn't seem to matter what country you're in or what your demographic characteristics are. Men seem to be pretty lonely. And part of it, in my conversations with guys, has been that if you especially have anything, quote, wrong with you or wrong with your home, that if you've had a dysfunctional family, which probably 85%, of us come from those, right? So with that, you can't talk about what's going on at home. You can't talk about your dad's drug problem or crime or the domestic violence or feeling alone or, all of these things that go on. So you stuff the emotion and you can't talk about it. And so you grow up learning that you can't talk about the things that bother your heart the most.
Mm,
So I think that this is true. And we were talking about which men feel more lonely, and those who have a big social network where you've got a lot of friends who are really caring about you, is one thing. But if you think about if you're with a group of guys, and the big thing that you do together is you play a sports thing. You need a lot of people to play pickup ball, right? And so a lot of the relationships that men have are what they call instrumental, not expressive. So you need a lot of bodies, in order to do a task. All right, but do you really talk about the things that bother you? All right. So that that's more of a girl thing. Girls tend not to have as many friends, but they are intimate,
mm,
and that you can share your heart and soul, which is probably why if a girl turns on another girl, they can really get you good, because they know all of your secrets. Okay. So I think that part of this is generational, but even looking at what do boys do? Like you could watch them watching TV together, and they don't even seem to be talking, but yet they're bonding, And so, what does it mean, to have these relationships with one another? But I think most of it is that guys feel like they can't trust other guys.
mm. Wow, yeah, really interesting to think about how we can lead boys to have more expressive relationships. And it's making me reflect on my own relationships with the boys and men in my life too.
Well, it's
Uh,
interesting. Like I've got this friend who says that if he's coming down with a fever, he'll never ask another guy, "Will you feel my forehead? Do you think I look like I'm getting sick?" He'll talk to
mm,
the girls. He'll talk to women that he doesn't even know that well, but he won't ask another guy because it would put them into physical touching, and there's a fear of homophobia. You know.
wow, yeah, and those are two more components of the man box. Yeah. So, what advice do you have for parents, especially, and teachers and coaches and other adults that are working with boys? What advice do you have to promote healthier ways of being?
Oh, okay. So I think that the biggest thing is talking to one another, to
Mhm,
really being present in the relationship. Um, so children have agency. They have ideas. They have opinions. Even at 2 years old, they'll tell you about them. All right. And so honor them, listen to them, that you want to uh, reframe conversations. So if someone says, well, I don't like, this person, well, you could start talking about with curiosity of, well, what is it about that conversation that makes you so uncomfortable? What is it that's going on? Explore with them, have them tell you instead of shooting back at them like, well, that's not okay. Well, why? Have them think about it, dig deeper, have them become a critical thinker. You
mhm,
know, Also, you want a role model in your own homes and your school classrooms, that you want to show that boys and girls, men and women, can all do the same thing,
mm,
that they can all drive a car, they can all, be a computer genius, they can all do sports, they can all be angry, they can all be sad, that you can all cook together. You want to demonstrate. It's that literature thing of show, don't tell, right?
mm,
And so it's important to, in your day-to-day interactions, to really be present and talk to them.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, amazing. And asking them again, like you're saying, how they're doing. Okay, I know we have one question in the Q&A. If you have more, please send them our way. Um, so what in terms of research, what do you think is missing? What research do you wish existed on the topic of masculinity and youth development?
I think that the number one thing is that a lot of the research is done by adults using adult questions and asking
Mm,
other adults what they think about kids. That they are not using a research methodology that have the questions that are designed by young people. They are not having the young people as the researchers. They're not getting the data from them as the research subjects. When they get the findings, they're not going back and talking to the youth and saying, well, this is what we find. Will you help us understand?
mm.
Is this accurate? Contextualize this. Okay, so I think that is the biggest thing, that we really need to start treating younger people as if they are human beings with agency. They are smart. They are already making decisions in their lives. So bring them into the conversation. Give them a seat at the table.
Yeah, that's really powerful. We in our work when looking at media representations, we look at ageism, and one of the identities that we are coding for and looking for is how older people are represented or misrepresented. But the topic of ageism is it's also applies to young people too. Got us thinking recently about how do we treat kids and how do we steal their agency by the ways we represent them. It's really fascinating.
Oh, it is. And so, like, Harvard has this set of research instruments on implicit bias, and they have
Hmm.
it on sexuality and gender, and they have it on race and religion, and they have it on age, but only on older people, nothing
Interesting.
on children. So
Yeah.
even they have
Yeah.
blown it.
Fascinating. Okay, we've got some questions that have come through. One question from an anonymous attendee is, how are women and girls impacted by the man box, and are they ever pressured to embody these same or similar traits?
What a good question. I think that a lot of females buy into this man box is the norm. This is what is supposed to happen, and we don't challenge it. All right. And that they uh, get impressed that if a guy's got a lot of muscle or if he can do, some of these big tasks, and maybe make fun of the guys who are softer in body and softer in compassion.
Mhm.
They get made fun of. And so the whole issue of being sissies. I have an aunt and she had a little boy and she wouldn't let him watch Mr. Rogers. Um,
Wow.
because she said he was a milk toast. Now, I must tell you, I don't know what a milk toast is, but I don't think it's nice, you
No.
know. Um,
Yeah.
so she would rather see him be aggressive. Fast forward, the kid is a murderer. No joke.
Oh,
Yeah,
goodness. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
Well,
And
a
so
real
it's like
example.
just a thread. So I think that women do feed this in. Then going back to your person's question on do women do this? Yeah, I think that some women find that in order to be successful in the world, that they have to replicate this toxic male behavior, and they get called what ball busters and man haters and all kinds of things. So we I like men. I like women. I like my own femininity. I feel like it's really powerful, and I don't want to give that up. Um, but I think that there are a lot of women who really start to become mean, and replicate some of these behaviors. So we have
Sure.
to take a look at what we do too.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Women and girls uphold the man box principles all the time. And in terms of how they're impacted by the man box, I mean, obviously, the more violent and repressed the men in our lives are, the more harm to women we experience too. I would also suggest looking at we did a report about women facing the double bind. And it's similar, it talks about how women in the workplace, women across all generations experience pressure to be more masculine and to be more feminine, and how it's never good enough, and how they're constantly facing a double bind, which is, I think, an interesting piece of research in tandem with the man box, kind of women's experiences having to navigate all of the gender expectations that conflict with each other. Um, we have we have a few more questions. One from Natasha. The world of psychology and psychiatry, excuse me, are not well versed in the spiritual science of life. Agency equals knowing who you are at your core, which is spirit. And the question is, how much of your work delves into getting young people to understand their mind, body, and spirit connection? There are so many factors that keep us away from our inner selves.
I like the question. That I think that I was beaten up enough. I got into a situation where I was being mistreated badly by gentlemen.
Mm,
They weren't gentlemen at all. Okay. And so I had to look at my own victim uh, position. And I started really doing a lot of work with my spiritual self and a lot of the Buddhist work. And I'm finding now that this is central to raising children,
mm,
to have them think about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And if they get angry, well, is somebody else doing that to you, or what are you doing? What are the messages? What is your narrative? How are you into the social construction of reality? Because we create, in many ways, our own realities, and we put up with certain things, and we don't confront, and we have to have courage. And these are not courage of muscle, but of the heart, and that they're harder to do. So I think that the spiritual component is absolutely vital, but it's not religion.
mm,
I think that those are two very different animals.
mhm. It reminds me of what you were saying earlier about the urge to put a phone or an iPad in the hand of a kid who's having a meltdown instead of kind of unpacking why it's happening. It really does connect to, I think, what this person's asking about, which is how do we connect like our behavior with how we're feeling and become more in touch with what's happening, which feels like a prerequisite to having expressive relationships. Fascinating. Okay, couple more. How would you, this is from Kay, how would you encourage people to speak up about this in a way that cuts through the fear created by the politically correct cultural paradigm, like supporting their fellow men in healthy ways? I have lived in several parts of California and Oregon where men especially feel afraid to speak up around masculinity. So, because of a pervasive underlying feeling that it isn't okay to be a man. So yeah, what is your advice on speaking up when there's kind of hesitance to speak up on it?
Yeah, it's really hard. That we all have been in situations where we are the lone wolf, and that we're vulnerable, and especially if we are dealing with people who are uh, aggressive, uh, trying to confront them's really hard. So, for instance, I live in New England, and so someone was in my network was at the bagel store the other day, and just tried to buy a bagel, right? And the guy in front has belt on with two guns and an ear patch, and that he's being loud and aggressive. And so, what do you say to somebody like that?
Mm,
And the storekeeper was very uncomfortable because she didn't want guns in her bagelry, and so there's a real physical risk involved, in some ways. We see it with road rage. We know that we could find ourselves on the ground for any number of reasons. So trying to be safe is really an important thing. On the other hand, you don't want to let, these guys get away with acting like jerks and by putting other people at risk. So trying to confront that is a very difficult thing. If you've got other people there who can support you, then that helps. But I think that the question is a very important one. And I must say that I don't have a particularly good answer for it. I know that it has to do with being courageous and
mm,
taking the risk and trying to put it out there. I think that when we talk about re-socializing little boys, you want to smack that situation right when it happens. You don't want to wait for 3 or 4 minutes. if you've ever trained a dog, you don't want to talk to the dog, 20 minutes after they've done something wrong. You want to deal with it right at that moment. So if the child is saying something racist or dangerous or bigoted, you want to confront it right at that moment. It's a whole lot easier to do with children than it is with a guy packing heat.
Yeah, wow, I can imagine that's scary. This question takes kind of a more positive turn, and so right now this is our last question. If anyone else has additional questions, feel free to send them in. But if it is our last one, I like ending on this note. Oh, never mind, another one has come in. This question is: do you have examples of media that is provided a positive example of masculinity? Obviously, Mr. Rogers, I feel, is one of them. And what should we look for in the content that we share with boys and men in our life?
Oh, there are so many positive images and messages that get put out in video games, on TV, on music. It is everywhere, but we have to look for it. And this is why I sometimes get upset with people saying, well, it's all media's fault. No,
Mm,
media has a lot of really powerful, wonderful messages. I know some little guys, and they are into the ponies, the little My Pretty Ponies,
mhm,
and that there's a whole network of these little boys who play with them. That there are all of these different games that really reinforce positivity. I've thought, I do a lot of human rights education. I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool if there were like human rights games that were actually cool, where you had characters and you could do, like kind of choose your own adventure, and have these options of which of these kind behaviors would you pick? And then you could
mm.
have one bad one, but see how people would make these kind of decisions. I think that with the gaming industry, there's all kinds of possibility that is existing. So it's really exciting to think about what could be.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I can think of a few. I mean, it reminds me of the conversation we have around social media too, which is you can't talk about social media without talking about the ways that it's impacted youth's mental health and been so toxic and negative and had really real negative impacts. But also, it's been an incredible tool for unifying communities like the pony, My Little Pony, community, and also a tool for social movements to come together. And so it's definitely there's a both and. Um,
Well, if you think about Greta Thunberg, with
mhm,
the environmental movement, here's this little gal who's sitting by herself, you know, uh, protesting in defense of the environment. And
mhm,
all of a sudden, there are thousands of organizations all around the world, and this is thanks to social media, you
right.
know. And so I think that there are all kinds of ways that we can bond together on it. On this organization, I'm on a steering committee for HRE USA, this Human Rights Educators. They have contests or awards that they give out every year that people don't even really know about. So I'm letting you know now that if you're a young person doing human rights work, then you can apply for these fellowships or for these grants. They give you money and you get
Mm,
promoted. And so there are all kinds of ways to reinforce this positivity. I think that there's much more positivity out there, it's just that we don't talk about it, because it's not sensational enough.
yeah, it's fascinating. And maybe community is the answer to some of the previous questions too, in terms of how to address some of these harder, situations or how to start conversations with people who are hesitant to have the conversations. I think maybe it might be turning to community and turning to the resources that exist already.
Well, well, also, I think that there's this issue on how to talk to one
Mm,
another. And if we're having a debate, you're not ever going to win, right? Because you go try to convince somebody else. If you have a disagreement, no, same thing. If you are doing a dialogue with, I want to understand why you think what you do, and
mm,
you're going to listen to me. And so you have rules around the dialogue where you learn how to talk and ask questions and be listened to in a respectful way. Then you can start to build a bridge for understanding. But so many times, I think communication is just from the hip, real quick response, and they're telling you exactly what they think, and there's no open door for even to explore the nuances that go behind it.
Yeah,
So learning how to
absolutely.
talk to one another, I think, is a critically important thing.
Sure. And in learning how to listen to understand. Yeah, as you're saying. Okay, this is the last question. Somebody has asked, how can women be proactive in unlearning the man box and not imparting it onto future generations? How can we stop from policing one another and perpetuating the ills of the man box?
Yeah, I think that is a really important one. And so there's a study out on mothers, and that we find that if a little boy throws a toy, we say, "You go pick that up." If it's a little
Mm,
girl throws the toy, it's like, "Let me get that for you, honey." All right. Uh,
interesting.
and so there is a way to empower, even with toddlers in our communication, to empower both boys and girls and to really confront our own biases. I think having other people we can trust who will call us on the carpet is a really important thing. I'm finding that again with my daughter who's got the little kids, that I don't even know sometimes I've said something that's old school and biased until she calls me on it.
Mm,
And instead of getting mad at her, I am grateful, and it will help me to have better interactions. I think that I get so socialized to seeing the world in a particular way, you know. Um, so we need to confront our own demons, I think.
yeah. I love that. And yeah, I mean, the ability to accept a challenge as a gift is such a what a superpower. Somebody said once to me that the goal is that it should be when you're calling somebody out on something that's sexist or racist, that it should be like saying to somebody they have spinach in their teeth and you can just take the spinach out and thank them for letting you know. And, and I like that. The idea that we should be fostering spaces where we can challenge each other.
I think
Really.
it's true, and we need to have that power of compassion and
Mm,
grace of generosity,
hmm.
that maybe people aren't really out to get you, and maybe they are really trying to help you. And this is going back to that Rambo versus the Dalai Lama mantra. Maybe people are already there to be your angels and to help guide you and to support you. But if you think that they're out to get you, then you're going to respond in like fashion. Uh,
Mm,
so I do believe that this notion of loving kindness and teaching uh, boys to be gentle men, that's what
right.
we would like. And we would be able to date better. We would have happier marriages. We wouldn't be beaten up. We would raise our children in more equitable ways. We would be more open to diverse ways of doing things and compositions of who we are. So having this issue of equity,
Mm,
is really central. So I think that we have to live it. And sometimes we don't see it until somebody tells us.
yeah. Wow, what a powerful note to end on, giving each other the benefit of the doubt and coming together. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Vissing. This has been an incredible conversation. And I know that I think there'll be a follow-up email and we can include some of the recommendations. I know there was the HRE USA. Am I saying that right? They
Yeah.
have the contest. We'll send out some information on those. And I just, thank you for sharing your expertise and your wisdom with us. And to everyone in the audience, thank you for taking time out of your Thursday to be with us here today. We have 3 more of these interviews in this series. Next week, we'll be talking with Mark Green. So I hope you join us then too. And yeah, I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. Thank you, Dr. Vissing.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.